There is a mechanism in your brain, a literal neural GPS, that once activated correctly can take an idea from pure imagination to physical reality. You can see something in your mind, and with absolute certainty you can hold it in your hand. This is not mysticism. This is biology. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how. The visual system is not just a passive receiver of light and color. It is a powerful, goal-driven mechanism hardwired to seek and accomplish. What you look at, you move toward. What you focus on, you begin to build. The brain doesn't just see. It filters, prioritizes, and magnifies the things that matter most to your survival, to your dreams, and to your purpose. You want to change your life? Then change what you look at. Change your focus. If you wake up every day and all your attention goes to your problems, guess what? Your life becomes a storm cloud. But if you wake up and fix your eyes on your mission, on the thing you want to become, on the vision that keeps you up at night, your brain will begin to wire itself for war, for success, for breakthrough. Think about it like this. Ever been late to work and suddenly every clock on every wall screams at you? You weren't seeing them before, but now you can't not see them. That's your visual system locked onto a goal. It begins to highlight everything that matters and delete the rest. That's what your brain does when you set a goal. You give it a target and it filters the entire world through that lens. That's why average people stay average. They never give their brains something great to aim at. You want a better life? Program your eyes with purpose. Tell your brain what matters. A mother walking into chaos will instantly lock eyes on her crying child. In a world full of noise, her visual system zeroes in like a missile. That's instinct. That's purpose. You've got to live your life like that, laser-focused. Like a mother finding her baby in a burning building. Nothing else matters. The distractions vanish, the clutter disappears, and all that remains is the target. That's what the brain is built for. To go get the thing that matters most. When a lion locks eyes on its prey, everything else fades to black. It doesn't hear the wind. It doesn't see the trees. It doesn't think about tomorrow. It sees the goal. That's you. That's the life you've got to live. One target, one obsession, one clear vision. When you wire your mind like that, even fear becomes fuel. Doubt becomes data. Pain becomes proof that you're closing in on something powerful. A high school student struggling in class sees one acceptance letter from the college of their dreams, and suddenly they can stay up late. They can turn down distractions. They can block out the noise. Why? Because the visual system has locked on to something meaningful. That vision ignites their biology. It gives their struggle a spine. They're not just working, they're moving towards something they see, something they feel, something they believe in. The reticular activating system, or RAS, is the gatekeeper of your mind. It's the filter that decides what gets in and what gets left out. Right now, you're surrounded by millions of bits of information, sounds, colors, movements, feelings, but you're only aware of a tiny slice. Why? Because your RAS is deciding what matters. And here's the truth most people never hear. You can train it. You can command it. You can reprogram the lens through which you experience your entire reality. If you start focusing on opportunity, your RAS will show you doors you didn't even know existed. But if you fixate on fear, failure, and self-doubt, your RAS will blind you to every open path and every potential victory. Think about when you buy a new car. Let's say it's a red Honda. Suddenly, you start seeing red Hondas everywhere, on the street, in parking lots, at stoplights. Were they always there? Of course. But now, your RAS has been told this matters. That's how your life works. Whatever you feed your mind with, whatever you tell it is important, it will amplify. You train your brain with your focus. Feed it success, and it will hunt down success. Feed it defeat, and it will trap you in a loop of loss. You are not a victim of your reality, you are the architect of it. Picture a young athlete who decides they're going pro. Before that moment, the world was random. But now, every meal becomes fuel. Every hour becomes a countdown. Every workout, every practice, every missed party is filtered through one mission. The RAS begins scanning for mentors, strategies, ways to win. Doors that were invisible before start swinging open, not because the world changed, but because their filter changed. Or think about someone who's heartbroken. Suddenly, every love song, every couple holding hands, every romantic movie on TV seems to follow them. That's not coincidence. That's the RAS doing its job. It's highlighting what aligns with what you believe or feel most strongly. So ask yourself, what are you programming it to find? Are you feeding it fear, or are you feeding it faith? Are you scanning for reasons to quit or reasons to conquer? A struggling entrepreneur who decides they're going to build something legendary starts to see ideas in coffee shop conversations. They hear lessons in every failure. Their brain starts highlighting possibilities instead of problems. They become solution seekers. That's the RAS, recalibrating under pressure. That's the power you hold, not just to survive this life, but to design it with precision, to sculpt it with intensity, to focus your entire being on one outcome and force the universe to respond. She sees the 4 a.m. wake-ups, the hours in labs, the failures, the rejections, the stress that will try to break her, and she says, "I'm ready for it." That's the moment the dream becomes dangerous, because now it's armed with grit. That's when the universe takes you seriously, when you're not just high on possibility, but grounded in the pain it will take to get there. Think about someone who wants to run a marathon. They imagine the finish line, the medal, the crowd. That's good, but that's not enough. Mental contrasting demands they also visualize the blisters, the muscle cramps, the days their legs feel like lead, the temptation to quit. They run that reel in their mind, and they prepare for it. Now, they're not just fantasizing, they're forecasting. They're mentally rehearsing adversity, so when it shows up, they don't flinch. They expect it. An entrepreneur dreams of freedom, wealth, and impact. But then they zoom in on the chaos, the sleepless nights, the lost money, the people who doubt them, the fear that whispers you're not enough, and they say, "Good, bring it." That's when they become bulletproof. Because the dream is no longer a wish, it's a commitment. They've signed the mental contract to go through hell to reach it. Even in relationships, it's powerful. A couple who dreams of building a family also sees the arguments, the sacrifice, the exhaustion, and they face it together. That's why they last. That's why they thrive. Because their love isn't just built on sweet moments. It's forged in the fire of what they've prepared for. That's what mental contrasting does. It transforms wishes into weapons. It doesn't just pump you up, it builds you for the war ahead. Dopamine is not just the feel-good chemical, it's the drive chemical. It's the molecule that moves you, that pulls you forward like a magnet toward meaning, toward challenge, toward purpose. Every time you chase a goal, every time you push through resistance, every time you say, "I'm not stopping," dopamine is the fuel in your veins. It doesn't reward the finish line, it rewards the pursuit. And that changes everything. Because if you only chase the trophy, you'll burn out. But if you learn to fall in love with the process, if you learn to crave the climb more than the summit, you'll become unstoppable. Think of an artist working on their masterpiece. They don't just release dopamine when the painting is done. They feel it with every brush stroke, every mistake corrected, every layer added. The joy is in the doing, not the done. That's dopamine guiding them through the grind. Whispering, "Keep going, it's working." You've got to live like that. Chasing excellence, not for applause, but because the process sets your soul on fire. A student grinding for exams doesn't get dopamine just for acing the test. They get it every time they lock in, every time they sit down when it would be easier to scroll, every time they say no to distraction and yes to discipline. That surge of dopamine is the body saying, you're on the path. That's the truth people miss. Motivation is not a lightning bolt. It's a spark that ignites every time you act like the person you want to become. Even in the gym, it's not the six-pack that gives you the real hit. It's showing up on the day you didn't feel like it. It's pushing out one more rep when your arms are shaking. That's where dopamine lives, not at the finish, but in the fight. Not in perfection, but in progress. You want to feel alive, you want to feel purpose, then stop chasing the end result and start chasing growth. A single mother working 3 jobs to feed her kids isn't running on caffeine alone. She's running on dopamine. Every paycheck, every sacrifice, every night she doesn't sleep is her brain rewarding her effort, telling her she's getting closer. That's not weakness. That's biochemical firepower. That's the system built into your brain saying, I see you, I feel you, keep going. Even a man rebuilding his life after failure, divorce, bankruptcy, betrayal gets dopamine not when the world sees his comeback, but when he wakes up early for the first time in months, when he makes the call, when he writes the plan. One step, one win, one chemical message from the brain saying, this is what survival looks like. That's the power. Repetition builds identity, not luck, not talent, not bursts of motivation. It's what you do over and over again that carves your character into stone. Every action is a vote for the person you want to become. Every small choice stacks, layer by layer, into a version of you that either rises or rots. You don't become disciplined by shouting affirmations into the mirror once a month. You become disciplined by showing up when it's hard. You don't become confident by wishing for it. You earn it by doing the thing you're afraid of again and again until fear loses its grip. Picture the boxer training in a rundown gym. The lights flicker, the equipment's old, the air is thick with sweat and silence, but day after day they show up. Same punches, same footwork, same brutal drills. Why? Because repetition is how greatness is born. Not in the big moments, but in the unseen ones. That's where identity is forged. In the quiet, in the grind, in the commitment to keep repeating who you say you are until the world starts to believe it too. Think about the student who used to fail every test. People laughed, teachers doubted, even their own mind whispered lies. But they decide, enough. So they start studying for 30 minutes, then 60, then hours. Not once, but every day. The world doesn't notice at first, but something inside shifts. They start calling themselves a learner, then a scholar, then a leader. That's repetition rewriting identity. That's a nobody becoming somebody through consistency, not luck. A recovering addict doesn't reclaim their life in a single decision. They do it by choosing every day not to slip, not to numb, not to run. Repetition is the rhythm of redemption. One good day, then another, until the bad days lose power, until their story changes, until they can look in the mirror and say, I'm no longer who I was, and mean it. Even the janitor who dreams of becoming a CEO begins by repeating excellence in the small. Shows up early, stays late, cleans with pride, repeats greatness in every task, no matter how small. Until those repetitions become a reputation, and that reputation becomes identity. The artist who feels like an imposter paints every day, not because they're inspired, but because repetition teaches the hand what the heart knows. Stroke by stroke, they go from hobbyist to master. The transformation isn't loud, it's quiet, but powerful. Because every time they create, they confirm who they are. That's how identity isn't claimed, it's proven. Embodied cognition locks it in. Because the mind doesn't just live in your head, it lives in your body. What you do physically shapes what you believe mentally. You don't become confident by just thinking confident thoughts. You become confident when you stand like it, when you move like it, when you breathe like it. The body sends a message to the brain, and the brain responds. You've got to live like the person you're becoming, not just visualize it. Because when thought and motion align, the transformation becomes unshakable. Picture someone walking into a job interview with their shoulders slumped, head down, voice shaking. They've already lost. Not because they aren't qualified, but because their body is screaming insecurity. Now, imagine they straighten their spine, lift their chin, and breathe from their diaphragm. They speak from the chest, grounded and certain. That shift isn't fake, it's feedback. The body is telling the brain, we're safe, we're strong, we're ready. That's embodied cognition in action. And it works not just in moments, but in identity. Think about an athlete before the big game. They don't just sit there thinking, I'm a winner. No, they warm up, they move with power, they stretch, shout, lock eyes with their goal. Every action fires neurons that reinforce who they are. They don't wait to feel like a champion, they move like one. And that movement tells the mind it's time. You've got to stop waiting for the perfect thought and start living the truth you want to own. Even in recovery, this truth is explosive. A person healing from depression might not feel strong, but when they force their feet out of bed, put on real clothes, take a walk, speak to a friend, their body starts telling their brain a new story, one of possibility, one of movement, one of rising. The act comes first, the belief follows. Embodied cognition is not about pretending, it's about practicing the truth until your brain makes it law. Watch a kid pretending to be a superhero, arms out, chest up, voice loud. They believe it. Why? Because the body fuels the fantasy. That's how you become who you want to be. You don't just think it, you do it, you live it, you move like your future self until your nervous system catches up and says, this is who we are now. Even a musician feeling imposter syndrome doesn't break free by wishing. They sit at the instrument, fingers move, breath flows, rehearsal becomes ritual. Their identity is locked in not by what they think, but by what they embody. That's the moment everything shifts. Because the brain can argue with your thoughts, but it cannot ignore your action. Sleep and neuroplasticity cement the blueprint. Because what you do during the day doesn't mean a thing if your brain doesn't lock it in at night. You can grind, study, hustle, train, push your limits all day long. But if you're not sleeping right, your brain can't keep what you've learned. It can't rewire. It can't transform. Sleep isn't rest, it's reinforcement. It's the cement that hardens the foundation you laid with effort. The blueprint of your new identity gets printed when you're awake, but it gets etched into your brain when you're asleep. Imagine a student cramming for hours, pushing their brain to the edge, but they skip sleep thinking they're saving time. They wake up foggy, forget half of it, and wonder why it never sticks. But another student does the same work, then gives their brain what it needs, deep, uninterrupted sleep. While they rest, their neurons spark, the lessons replay, the connections solidify. One was just busy, the other is building. Think about an athlete training all day, sweat, pain, repetition. That's the input. But without sleep, the muscles don't repair, the coordination doesn't lock in, the body doesn't grow stronger, the brain doesn't integrate the skill. Sleep is where the transformation finishes. It's not optional, it's sacred. Even someone trying to overcome anxiety or trauma, they sit with their thoughts, challenge old patterns, speak new affirmations. That's step one. But the healing doesn't fully happen while they're awake. It happens when the brain files the new truths into place, erasing the old scars and laying down new tracks. Neuroplasticity is your brain's power to change itself, but sleep is the switch that turns it on. Picture a musician mastering a song. They practice over and over. Their fingers stumble, correct, repeat, but something wild happens after a night of good sleep. They wake up and play better. not because they practiced while sleeping, but because their brain rehearsed the effort. It's like the mind kept going, refining, stitching it in while the body rested. That's not magic. That's neuroplasticity doing its job. And sleep is the stage where it performs. Even a person rebuilding their self-worth must understand the affirmations they speak, the habits they choose, the new beliefs they fight to believe. Those seeds are planted during the day, but they root and grow in the dark, in sleep. That's when the brain says, this is who we are now, and begins to make it permanent. You're not just dreaming, you're downloading the upgrade. Action bridges the mental and the physical because thought without motion is just noise. You can have the clearest vision, the sharpest strategy, the strongest desire, but until you move, until you act, it all lives in the invisible. Action is the electricity that turns the blueprint into a building, the idea into impact, the belief into being. There is no transformation without motion. Action is where the abstract becomes undeniable. You want to change your life? Then stop sitting with your thoughts, stand up with your choices. A man can stare at a mountain all day, imagining the summit, thinking about the climb, watching documentaries, reading guides, but until he takes that first step, he remains a dreamer, not a doer. That step is the bridge, that one action. Because the moment his foot hits the trail, the fantasy becomes real. He's no longer talking about who he wants to be, he's becoming it. A student can read all the books, highlight every page, rehearse the plan in their mind, but when they finally sit down and take the test, when they write, when they answer, when they act, that's when the brain and body connect. That's when the identity is reinforced. Action tells the nervous system, this is who we are now. That's why procrastination feels like paralysis, because your body is waiting for your mind to send the signal, and your mind is waiting for your body to move. Break that cycle with a single action. Even a person lost in fear or anxiety, they can talk about change, write affirmations, visualize confidence, but the shift happens when they pick up the phone and make the call they're scared of. When they speak in the room they used to shrink in. When they show up, even when their heart is pounding. That action becomes proof. The mind may still doubt, but the body says, look what we just did. That moment builds belief faster than 1,000 thoughts ever could. An entrepreneur with a vision can pitch it in their mind 1,000,000 times, but when they step on the stage, launch the product, send the email, knock on the door, that's the bridge. That's the collision of the mental and physical world. And that collision, that's where reality changes. A musician dreaming of performing can rehearse in silence, perfect the notes in solitude, but the moment they stand in front of an audience, touch the keys, let the voice out, they shift from invisible to undeniable. Action makes you real. It makes your gift land in the world. Until you act, you want change? Then stop waiting for the right time. There is no perfect moment. There is only now. This breath, this heartbeat, this second. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. Every legend, every champion, every giant you admire once stood exactly where you are. Uncertain, scared, unprepared, but they moved. And that movement, that decision, that first imperfect action shattered the chains and summoned the future. Let them laugh, let them doubt, let them say you'll never make it. Because when the grind gets quiet, when the crowd disappears, when it's just you and the dream, that's when real ones rise. The wolf on the hill is never as hungry as the one climbing it. So climb, scratch, crawl, roar. You weren't born to fit in, you were born to stand out. You were born to become. Burn this into your soul. Discipline is doing what you hate to do, but doing it like you love it. That alarm clock you hate, answer it. That workout you dread, attack it. That work you've avoided, crush it. Because the grind doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you deserve. You want the crown? Carry the cross. You want the glory? Bleed for it. You want the top? then stop making excuses at the bottom. People out there have less than you, know less than you, and still do more than you, not because they're lucky, but because they're relentless. Success doesn't come from what you do occasionally. It comes from what you do consistently. And consistency is not sexy, it's not flashy. It's showing up when you're tired, it's pushing when you're broke. It's believing when you've got no proof yet. So get uncomfortable. Don't stop when you're tired. Stop when you're done. Don't chase easy. Chase evolution. Every time you fail forward, you earn your armor. Every time you rise again, you become fireproof. They might try to bury you, but they forget you're a seed. And when it hurts, when the voice in your head tells you to quit, smile, because that's the sign you're alive. That's the sign you're on the edge of becoming unrecognizable. And remember this forever. The man who says he can and the man who says he can't are both right. Which one are you? Your brain is not a prediction machine. It's a reality generator. When you wire in a vision so clearly that your body believes it's real, you will begin to act, speak, and move in alignment with that outcome. The brain cannot distinguish vividly imagined from physically experienced. So, see it in your mind, and one day, inevitably, you'll hold it in your hand